Now, welcome back to the 3-Hour News Show on See Today, and it's time for See Today Business. Now, one thing in 2023 they want to talk about renewable energy. It's a mouthful for some reasons today, and how Indonesia is looking forward to the future plans. Now, according to Indonesian Energy and Mineral Resources Ministry, the country has an electronic benefit transfer, or EBT, of around 3,000 gigawatts, where geothermal potential reaches up to 24 gigawatts. Indonesia is committed to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, which is set to reach zero net emission by 2050. And over the past 5 years, EBT generation has continued to increase and is currently generating a capacity of up to 12 gigawatts, while geothermal contributes around 2.2 gigawatts. And the Finance Ministry considers the issue of energy transition as not only a challenge, but an opportunity for economic growth. The issues are also predicted to become a common world agenda in 2023. And now we want to learn more and talk about the future of renewable energy here in Indonesia. We have a commissioner at the Society of Renewable Energy, Aufar Satria, with us. Hi, Aufar, how are you?
Hi, great. Good to be here.
So I follow SRE Women.
Oh, really?
Because I know that you guys are, a community that is contributing to workers who are specialized in the renewable energy, markets and industries, right? And I know you're the perfect person to talk about this. But we've just mentioned before that Indonesia actually has massive potential for renewable energies. We have geothermal that we haven't, tapped into. What do you think is the potential that has been properly utilized so far by the government in terms of renewable energy?
You're right by saying that, we are top 5, top 10 globally in terms of renewable energy potential. When calculating the numbers conservatively, I think we have around 443 gigawatts, if we calculate aggressively, we can reach up to 2,000, 3,000 gigawatts. So it's huge, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the global current, generation capacity in the world, which is around 3,000 to 4,000.
Wow.
Look at the numbers.
Yeah,
it's really huge, right? But I think currently our utilization is around 2 to 3%.
2 to 3% out of 100?
Out of 442.
Yeah.
Yeah, and comparing this to other Southeast Asian countries such as Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, they're reaching towards double-digit utilization, whether we are still at 2-3%. So there is a lot of room for improvement in renewable energy.
So what is the biggest challenge? Is it investment? Is it prioritizing? What do you think should the government be able to do to be able to start tapping into and maximize?
I think when looking at energy, we need to look at the basics, right?
Yeah.
So how do we see an energy source? We see it through 3 lenses. Number 1, we see affordability. So energy needs to be affordable because we don't want to burden the economy in using energy, because everything that we do revolves around energy.
Yeah.
So affordability is number 1. Number 2 is reliability. We want to make sure that energy is reliable. The system needs to be there when there is a demand, right? And number 3 is dispatchability. So being able to dispatch, especially Indonesia is an archipelago-based country, we need to be able to dispatch power easily. And the challenge is when we look at current BAU scenario, we use fossil fuels.
Yeah.
We rely on coal-fired power plants. And this is, compared to renewables, wins in these 3 lenses still, right? Wins in affordability, wins in reliability, and also dispatchability. So the challenge is, how do we create a good regulatory environment in which renewable energy is head-to-head
with what's currently available,
the fossil fuels, right? And the biggest, elephant in the room is coal. We use coal 60 to 70% right now in the energy mix, but we need to be able to transition slowly and as per the targets, thinking about just energy transition. So making sure that the workers, all of the people that relies on these coal power plants are still being managed properly. So it's a huge problem as well.
So it has to be a change of mindset, and then what you're mentioning is the system also needs to change, because the regulatory environment needs to be there to be able to support the renewable energy as well, right? So we have a big target here.
Yeah.
23% use of renewable energy in 2025 and 31% in 2050. We're only at 2 to 3% right now. Is that even realistic?
I think it's not a matter of realistic. We need to achieve it, right? Because globally, this is a problem, the net zero emissions. This is a global problem. And I think with, looking at these three levers that I said, we can pull some of the strings in the regulatory environment to make sure that these targets are achieved, right? For example, in affordability, we can play around with the tariff system. So making sure that it's head-to-head in terms of tariff, renewables versus coal, for example, either it's feed-in tariff or other systems, or working with private sectors, because we can tap into that. So we can, balance out the financial burden towards the private sector as well, right?
Yep.
So there are other levers in reliability, making sure that the right technologies are put into place, and other stuff as well. But then, I think, you mentioned numbers, but then in the recent publication, I believe that ministry have revised the targets because they have the new net zero emissions ambitions, which is, I think in 2050, they want to make sure that renewables exceed fossil fuels in the energy mix. And in 2060, they want to make sure that all power is renewable. So it's accelerating quite fast.
I mean, we're only tapping 2 to 3% at this moment in time. So do you think infrastructure-wise, there's bound to be a lot of investment having to come in to make sure that we're able to finance this transition? So where do you see this happening? What can the government do to boost the use of renewables to make sure that they will achieve the target? Or not just achieving the target, just changing the mindset?
Exactly. I think there's probably two things in mind. Number one is working more with the global stakeholders. Because again, I will stress this, that emissions will be felt, the effect globally, not only in Indonesia.
That's right.
So developed countries, other countries, they want to help us transition and invest in renewables. So making sure that there are regulatory environment that allows lucrative investments is also key, right? We have, I think in G20, it's announced that we got 20 billion package for the Just Energy Transition Partnership Fund from the developed countries to retire coal power plants 10 years early, half of the coal power plants 10 years early. It's a good starting point. But again, making sure that we engage the global stakeholders and get innovative financing is really key as well. Infrastructure building planning is important as well, but financing is the key here. And financing stems from making sure that the regulatory environment allows good investability.
That's certainly really interesting, because in the G20, or even before the G20, I think our finance minister has, openly stated how expensive it's going to be for Indonesia to actually do a transition, and how without, developed countries' help, we wouldn't be able to do it. So it's great that we've achieved a lot of, pools of financing possibilities. So, regulatory is going to be one thing. But the government is also, you mentioned before, targeting the net zero emissions by 2050. Initially, it was 60, right? Now it's gone up to 50. Renewable energy is is it one of the keys to achieve that? And do you think with that, it's going to be possible to achieve the target by 2050?
It's the core of net zero. Because let's go back to the basics. What's the definition of net zero? Net zero is basically making sure we have the same or increased level of economic productivity. So making sure we still do all of the things that we do without emitting, right? Emissions, without emissions. Either if we emit, either we capture it, or either we offset it, right? With solutions. And renewable is very important because in the value chain of all economic activity, we use energy, right? You wake up, turn on the lights, use energy. In manufacturing, for example, steel, one of the big industry in Indonesia, we use gas, for example, fossil fuels is energy, right? If we have a good renewable energy ecosystem, we can slowly switch those fossil fuel usage towards renewable energy. For example, we can, instead of using furnaces from gas, we can use electric arc furnaces, which is renewables. So a lot of these levers can be pulled using renewables instead of fossil fuels. But then when we look at the trends in Indonesia's emissions for net zero, number one is agriculture, right? Land use, forestry, because we have a lot of peatlands, a lot of forestry. But number two is power. So it's a big emission, right? Every country has different emissions, trends, but we do have power in number two. So this is really important. And it acts as a catalyst for other industries as well, as I mentioned to you. In other industries, we can switch to renewable electricity instead of using the fossil fuels.
Well, speaking of this renewable ecosystem that we have to build, you've mentioned before that we're top 5 in available resources when it comes to renewable energy that could actually power more sufficiently if we, have the infrastructure there in place and also encourage the ecosystem. But for those of us who are newbies when it comes to renewable energies, right? Can you explain to us what is the situation in Indonesia in terms of resources that we have? What are the resources the government currently using for renewable energy, that 2 to 3%? And what renewable sources are not yet tapped into and can be maximized?
Yes, I think we have all of the natural resources. We are situated in the Ring of Fire,
Yes.
which means we have a lot of geothermal opportunities, right? We have up to 30 gigawatts of renewable energy potential in geothermal. But the thing is with geothermal, and it's baseload power. So baseload meaning that it's very reliable, highly dispatchable, so it's perfect. But then, number one, it's financially is very challenging because it has a lot of risks. It's similar to oil and gas in a way that it needs to be explored, developed, and produced. So it's similar to oil and gas. The risk is very high. So we need innovative financing, going back to these financing levers. We have also good solar potential, solar power. We have good solar irradiation. We have decent wind speed up to more than 5 meters per second. So I think solar and wind is very, very big as well. I think up to 200 gigawatts conservatively, but if we look at aggressively, it can achieve up to 2,000 gigawatts. So solar and wind. Hydropower is also very, very important. We have a lot of water storages, water resources that can be utilized. But last two interesting technologies are, number one, biomass.
Biomass?
Yeah, biomass. We are agricultural-based economy. We have a lot of wastes.
Yes.
We can use those wastes to switch towards biomass power plants. And this is actually one of the key levers that government pushes in coal. So it can slowly replace feedstock in coal power plants with pellets, right? So it reduces the emissions, but still we use the infrastructure. So I think it's one of the
That's true.
the interesting solution. And lastly is nuclear. I'm a big fan of nuclear power plants, because it's highly reliable, it's highly efficient, and it's highly green as well.
Yeah.
It has a lot of downsides in the waste department, but then if we can utilize it, in the next 20, 30 years, it's going to be very powerful.
Well, Indonesia is in the works of setting up the regulations necessary to build nuclear power.
Yeah.
It has been mentioned. I mean, I am certainly very interested to see the updates on that. Maybe someday we can have a chit-chat, of how that one's developing, because that's a lot of foreign direct investment happening in Indonesia as well. So certainly very interesting. So Aufar, thank you so much for your time. This is like a newbie to renewable energy introduction to Indonesia, and it's very, very high potential. And we're looking forward to see its development here into 2023.
I'm very excited as well.
Yes, surely. So thank you so much, Aufar, for your time. And those were the economics and business updates for this hour. When we return, Ranga will bring you the latest from the world of sports. Stay tuned on 3 Hour News Show and see you today.